Mr. Gysi is chairman of the parliamentary group of the Left Party in the German Bundestag. He also played a critical role in the democratic transition of East Germany in 1989 and 1990. And I think I do not overstate anything if I say that he has been the most important figure in the German left ever since. Gysi has been a member of the Bundestag for almost 20 years, and together with Oskar Lafontaine, the main driving force behind the creation of today's Left Party. So, here's the man who has taught the German and European conservatives what it means if somebody, be it in parliament or on TV talk shows, proves to be wittier than you.
Ja, einen schönen guten Tag, liebe Genossinnen und Genossen, liebe Freundinnen und Freunde und verehrte Gäste.
Dear comrades, dear friends,
ich habe hier viele Stichpunkte bekommen für den Vortrag
now
und
my
habe mir
team
gerade
has
überlegt,
prepared
dass ich die bleiben lasse.
a long list of items I should talk about. But I've just decided to change my mind
Komme ich gerne wieder hierher und werde Ihnen dann einen Vortrag halten
do it
über die
differently.
erstaunlichen
So if you
Ähnlichkeiten
want to, I'm happy
dem
to
Kapitalismus
be
in
back
den USA
and talk
und
about
bestimmten
the
staatssozialistischen
surprising
Erscheinungen, wie sie aus der DDR
similarities
oder der Sowjetunion
I see when I compare capitalism
nenne Ihnen gleich ein
and
Beispiel.
state
Das Kunstverständnis,
socialist
das diese Hand
systems.
da oben
I will give you
widerspiegelt mit dem Hammer drin,
an
ist
example.
exakt
But if you
staatssozialistisch.
see the hand
Und ich
up
freue
there
mich
on
schon,
the
das auch
wall,
in New York
you
zu sehen.
will realize that this is state socialism,
Aber eigentlich bin ich sehr
and
froh.
I'm happy to see this.
Ich bin froh, dass eine parteinahe Stiftung von uns, die Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung, ein Büro in New York eröffnet und ich gestern bei der Eröffnung dazu sprechen durfte.
I'm very happy to be here today. The Rosa Luxemburg Foundation opened its office in New York yesterday, and I think that this is a good thing to do. Now, let me tell you an anecdote. Former President Reagan decided to put up a piece of the wall as a statue in the USA or in New York. Now the mayor of the city wanted to have it, but he wanted to prove that this was real, it was for sure. So there was a certificate signed by Mr. Modrow and myself proving that this was a true piece of the wall. And then we inaugurated the office of the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation yesterday, and she is an extremely important woman. She was Jewish, she was from Poland or maybe from Germany. She was a left-winger and a decisive opponent of wars, and she was very much in favor of social justice, and she also was an eminent thinker. She said, freedom is always the freedom of those who think differently, the others. An important sentence even Helmut Kohl, the former German chancellor, has quoted, but she also said that sometimes if you want to transform a society, you might have to reduce rights for a certain period, but then you have to go and say this is a limitation of rights, but this is only meant to be temporarily. Now, if you go and praise the reduction or limitation of rights, it's a disaster, and we have to see her sentence, her phrase in this very context, because it's easy to go and say all those should be free who think like I do, and it's always difficult to grant that freedom to those who think differently. Now, my question, my topic is the perspectives of the left in Germany and in Europe, which triggers another question, i.e., is there a perspective for socialism, or is capitalism the last answer of the history of humankind? Now, it's not easy to answer this question because state socialism has failed. The Soviet model, the Soviet system failed.
Und so wie es war, ist es dann
And
letztlich auch
this
zu Recht
had to be so.
Die Frage
The
ist
question
nur,
is, however, why?
warum?
And
Und
what
was
does
bedeutet
this
das für die
mean
Linke
for the
heute?
left today? The Soviet
Das
model
sowjetische
failed,
Modell scheiterte
among
unter
others,
anderem daran, das wird viel zu selten thematisiert, dass es
because
die ökonomischen Prozesse nicht beherrscht.
was not capable of
Die
coping with
Arbeitsproduktivität
the
in der
economic
DDR lag um
processes. The
40 Prozentpunkte hinter
productivity
der
of East Germany
Arbeitsproduktivität in der
was 60%
Bundesrepublik
behind the
Deutschland.
labor productivity in West Germany.
Zweitens
And
wurden weder demokratische Rechte noch Freiheitsrechte
the
ausreichend
democratic
organisiert
and the
und
social
gegeben.
rights were not
Es war von Anfang
really
an immer
organized
als
in
Diktatur.
a democratic
Und wer
way.
beschreiben,
It
was
was
das
always
Problem einer
organized
Diktatur
as
ist,
a
noch ohne jede
dictatorship.
moralische
And I
Prüfung.
say dictatorship without any moral
Eine Diktatur kann am Anfang mehr leisten
evaluation. Of
als
course,
eine
in the
Demokratie,
beginning, a dictatorship can
weil eine
achieve more
Diktatur
than a
sehr
democracy because a
zügig verändern
dictatorship
kann.
can
Du
implement
kannst innerhalb
change
eines
much
Jahres eine große
quicker than
Bildungsreform machen,
a
eine große
democracy because you can undertake
Gesundheitsreform machen,
reforms, a
andere
health
Reformen
reform,
machen.
an
Und da sind die
educational
Leute sogar erst
reform. People
begeistert
are
und sagen, Mensch, das ist ja
enthusiastic and they say,
fantastisch, so
well,
schnell kann
look
das gehen. In der
how quick
Demokratie würde
all
da
this can be
ewig
done. And
diskutiert werden
imagine
und
in a
bis da was
democracy, people
passiert, etc.
debate for hours and days and weeks and months
Aber eine
before
Diktatur kennt
change
keinen
is
demokratischen
happening.
Wechsel.
However, there is no
Und weil eine
democratic
Diktatur
change in
keinen
a
demokratischen
dictatorship,
Wechsel kennt,
which means that
setzt dann eine Stagnation
stagnation
ein.
is a
Denn die
natural
Leute, die
consequence because
anfangs in die
those
Ämter
who
gewählt
are
werden,
being
haben
elected
anfangs Ideen und dann immer
have
weniger
good
Ideen.
ideas in the beginning, but eventually
Erich
they don't have
Honecker
any
in der
good ideas
DDR
anymore.
wurde
Erich Honecker was
1946 in
elected
das
to the
Machtzentrum gewählt, in das
Politburo
Politbüro
of the
des
Central Committee of the
Zentralkomitees
SED
der
in
SED.
1946,
Und
and he was
war es
still a member
1989 noch immer.
of that
Und wenn es
very
die
body
DDR
in
weitergegeben
1989
hätte,
and had
wäre
the
er da drin
DDR
geblieben,
existed
solange er
furthermore,
gelebt hätte.
he would have been
Wenn
a
überhaupt
member
jemand aus dem
of
Politbüro
this committee
ausschied,
for good.
dann
So
weil
the
er politisch
only
missliebig
reason why people
Und dann gab es einen einzigen Fall, einmal ist ein
stopped being members of
Politbüro-Mitglied
the
wirklich aus
Politburo
gesundheitlichen Gründen
were
ausgeschieden.
ideological
Da
reasons,
aber
but there was
immer
only
alle
one case
angeblich aus
of
gesundheitlichen
someone
Gründen
who
ausschieden, auch wenn
had
gar
to
keine
opt out of the
vorlagen,
committee for
wussten
health
sie nicht, wie man
reasons.
der
Now,
Bevölkerung
since
erklärt, dass es
it's
diesmal
always
wirklich
been alleged
gesundheitliche
health
Gründe sind.
reasons why people opted out
Ja,
of
da
the
könnte ich
committee or
Ihnen
were
Geschichten
ousted of the
erzählen, ich
committee.
lasse das
It
alles
was a bit
bleiben.
difficult to
Ich will
tell
nur
the
sagen,
citizens why this time it was
die
truly
ganze
for health
Struktur ist
reasons.
letztlich
But
von der
anyway,
Menschheit nicht akzeptiert worden.
this was
Sie ist
a
abgelehnt.
dictatorship,
Daraus hat
which
der
meant
Kapitalismus den Schluss gezogen,
as a consequence,
dass er gesiegt
that
ist.
capitalism thought
Das, glaube ich,
it
ist
had
falsch.
won. But this
Er
is
ist
not
nur übrig
true.
geblieben.
Capitalism
Und
is
das heißt auch
only
nicht, dass man
what
nicht über Alternativen nachdenken
remained,
kann oder nachdenken muss, wenn ich zum
which
Beispiel an die gegenwärtige Krise und viele andere
means
Erscheinungen denke.
that of course we have
Und dass es sie
to
auch geben
ponder
wird. Aber
alternative ways,
ich
in
selbst
particular in
bezeichne
a
mich als
crisis. Now,
demokratischer
I
Sozialist.
am a democratic socialist. I don't want any
Strukturen,
authoritarian structures,
weder von Leuten, die sich
neither
links nennen,
imposed by people
geschweige denn von Leuten, die sich rechts nennen.
consider themselves
Nur ich habe
leftists,
ein
nor by
Problem.
people who
Ich habe
consider
kein
themselves
praktisches
rightists.
Beispiel eines Demokraten.
Now, the problem is I can't give you an
Kann
example
niemand sagen, fahr dahin,
where we do
schau es dir
have
an,
democratic
dort gibt
socialism.
es
There
einen
is no country
demokratischen
where
Sozialismus.
I could send people to if they want to see it with their
Es gab
very eyes.
vielleicht einen
Now, there
demokratischen
there
In
were
den
the
Anfängen.
beginnings
Das war die Pariser
of
Kommune. Aber
a
die liegt schon
democratic
so lange zurück.
socialism,
Es gibt
and that
niemanden
was
mehr, der eine
the Paris
persönliche Erinnerung
community.
daran hat. Außerdem ist sie gescheitert.
But that's a long time
Da gab
ago.
es einen
That
zweiten
was a
Versuch
long time ago.
in Chile.
And
Unter Allende.
ultimately,
Und
the
ich finde,
Paris
das
community
darf man der
failed.
chilenischen
And there was
Armee und
another
Pinochet und auch dem
attempt to
amerikanischen
implement
Präsidenten und dem
democratic
amerikanischen
socialism, and
Geheimdienst
that
sehr
was
übel nehmen,
Chile.
dass sie dieses
So we
Modell
really have
zerschlagen
to
und
blame
kaputt
the
gemacht haben. Es
US
wäre wichtig
administration
gewesen, das wirklich
and the
mal
US Secret
auszuprobieren,
Service
was dort
for
für ein Weg dazu
having
gegangen ist.
crushed this effort.
Aber was ist im Ergebnis des
Now,
Untergangs
what
des
happened to the
Staatssozialismus
left
mit den
when
Linken geschehen?
state socialism reached its end. As Stefan Liebig said, many left our party, sometimes for the same reason why they had become members. So they had become members in order to make a career, and then you had to leave the party in order to have a career. For me, it was different. I went a different way. I am convinced that capitalism means disadvantage, it means war, it means limitless wealth, which would not be a problem normally, but the limitless wealth creates limitless poverty at the other side. So we need different structures, and we have to discuss different structures. However, people don't think that the left has economic competence, is competent when it comes to economic matters. Now, people go and say the economy fails, usually, and there is a lack of trust with respect to democracy and freedom there where the left rules. Now, what do we do with respect to this lack of trust? Now, in the USA, in the 1950s, there was McCarthy, who also organized a militant form of anti-communism, which is having an impact still today. Now, there is a topic which should have been discussed by the USA even more than it has been discussed so far, actually, because the intellectual potential, the intellectual minds that had to leave the country as a consequence of McCarthy's anti-communism. The problem, that's a sin. I'm not only thinking of Brecht, I'm also thinking of Charlie Chaplin and others. Of course, I don't want to talk about the Nazi dictatorship, but I do want to say that the peoples pay much too much for these types of mistakes, and I am blaming the GDR because lots of left-minded people immigrated into the GDR to East Germany. Bloch, for example, the great philosopher, he wanted to live in the GDR, but then they produced an extremely narrow situation for him, and that's why he went to West Germany. So this is the reason why it's so difficult for the left. And then, as you all know, life is not always fair. Meaning, there had been left parties in Europe, like the Euro communists in Spain, Portugal, Italy, and sometimes also in France, who draw a line between their ideas and state socialism, but it didn't help them. They were not treated different from state socialist supporters. In Italy, for example, the Italian Communist Party had 36% of the votes, and the then US administration even got nervous. And we had also excellent results for the French Communist Party, but that's long gone, it's long over, and you would not get that kind of support for a left-wing party anymore. But there is another aspect we have to see, and that's the question of lacking trust, because the Soviet Union wanted to have the leading political party, which had to decide what the other political parties had to do and say, like Stalin, who then banned the Polish Communist Party. which is why there is
sind Sie heute im
a lot of mistrust today, which is not a problem on the one hand, but it makes it difficult to organize or to get organized. We are having a conservative European party, we have a social democratic European party, we do have a green and a liberal European party. Now finally, and we were the last ones to do so, a European left has been set up, and it's a weak party, I have to say, because there is still a lot of mistrust. Now, I am describing this situation to you, and you might now wonder and ask me, why should I join the left then? There is obviously a lack of perspective. But this is not true. We just have to be aware of the weakened position we are in order to then go and gain the trust of the citizens. Let me tell you what bothers me about the West and what I don't like. I mean, the left can bear a lot, except victories and losses. When we win, we quarrel, who's to be blamed for the success. And in a situation of defeat, we also discuss who's the responsible person, which keeps us busy for months until finally we agree on one person, which makes things even more difficult. But that's actually not what I'm talking about. There are other problems where the left has to truly show its face, and we have to reach an agreement, because wars don't solve the problem of humankind or the problems of humankind. Or would you think that wars can solve the problems of humankind? If all leftists agree that you cannot solve problems by means of wars, you have to go and fight wars, no matter whether these wars take place in Europe or in El Salvador or Ecuador. Second question. Do we believe that social justice is a decisive question and that we should not tolerate poverty in the world and accept that there is so much poverty in the world? And this is, by the way, one of the reasons why the left has come about. First of all, it was meant to combat poverty. Now, there is more and more wealth in the hands of few, but there will be more and more poverty as a consequence. And of course, you can go and say there are wealthy nations and poor nations. But what about the global economy, and what's the policy we carry out and implement with respect to Africa and Latin America? Now, if I go and say, I'm a member of the left, I'm a leftist, and I fight poverty, I have to fight poverty globally, otherwise I'm not a leftist. If I only refer this issue to my country, I am bound within a much too narrow mindset. Now, ecological sustainability, that's another issue. For quite some time, the left had kind of difficulties in dealing with this topic, and the Green Party became strong. For the Left Party, this was an ancillary contradiction, so to speak. But sustainability is about the very existence of humankind, and see the result and the impact capitalism has. However, different from the Green Party, we should never go and raise and answer the question about ecological sustainability without considering the social dimension. Now, I was at a conference once, and there was a professor next to me, and he said, well, the left is to be blamed for the ecological problems we have in the world. Now, I did not really understand what he meant, because I thought, why are we the ones to be blamed for the ecological disaster? Now, he said, if there was only tourism carried out or done or enjoyed by the top 10,000,
Tourismus kein
ecology
ökologisches
would
Problem.
not be threatened.
Wenn
And
nur
if
die
only the
obersten
rich ones
10.000 Autos
had
führen,
cars, this would not be
wäre
a
das Auto kein
problem,
ökologisches
an
Problem.
ecological
Sie
or
haben dafür
environmental
gesorgt, dass
problem
alle
either.
Tourismus
Now,
gehen
you
und alle
want
Auto
to have
fahren und jetzt haben wir die
everybody
Katastrophe.
enjoy
Also ist
these
die Linke schuld.
privileges, and thus you are the ones to be blamed
Das
for
fand
the
ich
environmental
doch herausfordernd, muss ich
catastrophe.
sagen.
Now, this was a
So
challenge
hat
for
auch
me.
noch
The
nie
argument as
mir
such was a
gegenüber
challenge
jemand
for me,
argumentiert.
and it had been the first time ever
Dann
I
habe ich auch
heard it.
verstanden, dass
Now,
die Grünen
the
einen hohen Benzinpreis fordern.
possibility would
Und
be
zwar, damit das ein
to
Privileg
go
von mir
and say
wird,
we
Auto zu
have
fahren
to
und die
pay
anderen
a
nicht
lot of
mehr
money
Auto
for
fahren können. Und
gasoline
dann ist
so
es
that only few
erstens
people
ökologisch,
drive a
zweitens
car,
habe ich auf der Autobahn
which
meine Ruhe,
makes
ne?
driving on a
Weil ich ja nur
highway
mit wenigen
much
dann Auto
nicer
fahre.
than it is
Das
now.
darf
But this
niemals
can
die
never
Lösung der
be
Linken sein.
a
Das
solution
heißt, die
adopted
Linke
by the
steht
left,
vor der
because the left has to
schwierigen
find an
Frage,
answer
wie
to the
mache
question how
ich
this
das
can be done
ökologisch
ecologically,
und trotzdem sozial gerecht.
i.e.
Nicht
environmentally
organisiert über
healthy
Privilegien,
and
indem die
also
einen
socially
etwas dürfen und der
just
großen
and
Mehrheit
fair.
schließt man es aus.
So we should not ignore
Aber
the ecological
trotzdem
dimension.
ist die Frage,
And of course, we can talk about
wir können ja gerne über
transformation, we can
Transformation reden,
write
wir können darüber
intelligent programs,
diskutieren, wir
but
können
what if
wichtige
people don't
Programme
follow us?
schreiben, wenn die
What
Menschen
if
uns nicht
people
folgen,
don't believe us?
wenn sie
What
nicht an
if
uns glauben,
people don't trust us,
wenn sie uns
but
nicht trauen,
mistrust us?
sondern
We
eher
won't be
misstrauen,
successful in such a situation.
dann werden wir
And in
keinen
order
Erfolg.
to have them trust us,
Und
we
damit wir
need to change the
Vertrauen
culture,
herstellen, brauchen wir erstmal eine
i.e.
andere
our
Kultur
way
im
of
Umgang
dealing with
miteinander.
each other. Now you have the
Diese
left-wing
linke
tradition, according to
Kultur,
which
wonach der
one
eine mal
person
feststellt, dass
considers
der andere
the
eine
other
völlige Fehlkonstruktion in
wrong
seinem Denken
almost all the time, i.e.
Weil ja
an
nur
individual
das
believes that he or she is right and the other
schreckt
is
Leute ab.
wrong automatically.
Weil sie
But
sagen,
this
mein
is
Gott,
what
wenn man
people
da mal
don't
eine andere
like because
Meinung
they
hat, wie wird
are
man da
shocked and they don't want to be
behandelt? Wie wird
treated
damit
this way. So we
umgegangen?
have to change
Das
our
heißt, die
culture
eigene
and the
Kultur,
way
die
we deal
Kultur,
with
die wir
each
Linke
other, because it
untereinander
depends
pflegen,
on our
kann
way of
entweder
dealing
Vertrauen
with
schaffen
each other, whether people
oder
trust us
Vertrauen
or
abbauen und
not.
sogar zu
And I
misstrauen.
guess we have not talked
Ich
about
glaube,
this
darüber haben wir zu
topic
selten diskutiert.
sufficiently so far.
Aber nun,
Now, in view
bei
of
all
all
den
these
Schwierigkeiten ist es
problems,
ja
I have to
erstaunlich, wie wir uns
admit
entwickelt
that
haben. Ich
we
nenne Ihnen
have
mal ein
gone
paar
a
Punkte,
long
die
way. And we've been
Also, es ist ja wahr,
surprisingly
was hier
successful.
festgestellt
Let me
wurde,
tell
es gab
you
in der DDR die
why.
Staatspartei
You
SED
know that
und wir
the
sind aus
SED
dieser
was the
SED
state party of the GDR, and
haben
this
ja
is,
die
so to speak,
Bürgerinnen und Bürger der
our
DDR
origin.
unter der SED mehr
However,
gelitten
the
als die
citizens of the
Bürgerinnen und Bürger der
GDR suffered
Bundesrepublik
more
Deutschland.
under the SED than the citizens of West
Theoretisch hätten wir
Germany.
ja
So
bessere Chancen
our
haben müssen
chances
in den alten
should have been
Bundesländern
better
statt
in
in den
the
neuen
new federal states,
Bundesländern,
i.e. in the
weil
West
in
than
den
in
neuen
the
Bundesländern
East,
hatten ja die
because
Leute mit
in the new
unserer
federal states in
Partei
the West,
schlechte
people did
Erfahrungen
not
gemacht
really
und in den
know
alten
the
kannten sie
SED,
sie
and
ja
in
kaum.
the East they knew it.
Aber so
But
läuft
that's
das
not
nicht.
the way
Aber die Frage war
things
eine andere.
happened.
Unser erstes
We had the
Wahlergebnis
first
war ja
general
ein Signal,
elections,
also das
and
ist
there
der
was a
Teil,
kind of a
der uns als
signal. We
PDS
had
schon
started
reformiert
with
oder sagen wir mal dabei, uns zu reformieren.
party reforms. The
Nimmt das
question
zu oder
is,
nimmt das
does
ab?
this get you more votes
ist
or
ganz
not?
entscheidend.
Not. Does it get you
Gewinnst du
more trust or
Vertrauen oder
not?
gibt
I mean,
sich das langsam?
it
Weil das
used
waren
to
frühere
be
Funktionäre, die uns
former
gewählt haben und die Angst hatten,
officials
dass aus ihnen
who
nichts mehr wird. So konntest du dir das ja
voted
einigermaßen
for us.
versuchen zu erklären. Und
Now,
tatsächlich war es so,
we
danach
did
kam eine
quite
Kommunalwahl,
well
hatten
in
wir
the
schon
first
weniger
general
Stimmen.
elections, and then there were regional
kam
elections and
die Wahl der
municipal,
Landtage,
local
noch
elections,
weniger Stimmen.
and we lost votes,
Dann
and
hatten wir
then
einen
there was a
Finanzskandal,
financial
auf den will ich
crisis. I
jetzt
don't
gar
want to
nicht
talk
im
about the
Einzelnen
details, and then
eingehen.
again there
Dann
were
kam die
general
Bundestagswahl,
elections,
da
and we
hatten
lost
wir
votes.
noch mal deutlich
But
weniger Stimmen.
we kept on, and we
Aber wir haben
worked.
hart weitergearbeitet und plötzlich begann ein
Nevertheless, and we
Stimmenanstieg.
tried hard, nevertheless, and
Alles
we
noch vor der Vereinigung
began
mit der WSG.
to win
Plötzlich
votes,
nahm das
and that was
Vertrauen der
still
Bevölkerung
before
in uns zu.
we merged with the WASG.
Und die Bild-Zeitung schrieb immer
Now,
weiter, das sind alles
in
alte
the
Funktionäre. Und ich habe ihnen dann
Bild-Zeitung,
irgendwann
they
erklärt,
said
dass
these
die Zahl der
are
SED-Funktionäre ja nicht ständig
old
zunehmen kann. Also,
officials.
das war ja irgendwann mal zu Ende, 1990,
But I
sodass
told
das
Bild-Zeitung the argument is
nicht
not
logisch
logical.
ist, ihr Argument. Und was war passiert?
People
Die
began
Leute
to
machten Erfahrungen mit dem
experience
Kapitalismus
capitalism.
und glaubten uns
And at the same
gleichzeitig,
time,
dass
they
wir keine
believed us and
autoritären
realized
Strukturen mehr
that we
wollen.
did not want any
Und
authoritarian structures
sagten,
anymore.
ja, doch, es muss etwas passieren.
and they began to understand that something was bound to happen. And they wanted to have things happening. And there were things, there used to be things in the GDR which people in West Germany did not know. For example, there were holidays, summer vacation, for example, and there were camps, holiday camps for children or summer camps for the children of all the workers, and you could send your children to these summer camps so that they'd have happy holidays, a feature absolutely unknown in West Germany. In 1949, West Germany, the Federal Republic of Germany, wanted to be more democratic than the GDR and also more social. Now they managed to be more democratic. This was quickly done. But it had always been extremely difficult to be more social than East Germany, than the GDR. I said in 1990 that the east of the country will certainly experience a major reduction of social benefits. Which is why eventually we started to gain votes in East Germany again. I mean, we also gained in West Germany. We had 0.3% in the first general election. And then we had 0.6% in the next election. So we increased our votes by 100%. And then next time we did a bit less well. So we got 0.9%. And there was an election for the European Parliament, where we gained 1.1% of the votes, and we were rather proud of doing better, but actually and basically we did not well. I mean, I still respect what people did, but those who said, I'm a member of the PDS, they were outsiders, and Stefan said before, no, we quickly gained the support now quickly. That's relative. I think it took a long time until people began to really acknowledge us. The question is, however, why was it so difficult to gain ground in the West? I've reminded you of McCarthy. And I would also like to remind you of the fact that the state apparatus in the West had been the one that had been the state apparatus of the Nazi time. So they went and told people, you have to be democratic and you have to do away with anti-Semitism, but you are still allowed to be anti-communist. It was the only European country that banned the Communist Party. In Italy, this would not have been possible. In France, impossible. No way. But in Germany, they banned the Communist Party. So there was a militant anti-communism in West Germany, and when people publicly criticized decisions made in West Germany, they were told, well, why don't you go and live in the GDR? Of course, the people killed at the war and people who were punished and sent to jail were not arguments one could use in order to convince West Germany of the excellence of the East German system. So the SED also has to be blamed for not having managed to convince West Germany to abandon its anti-communism. Now, this is, so to speak, a backdrop against which we started to work and act. I do remember there was a street rally in Munich, and 6,000 people were there. And whatever I said, they applauded me. And I said at the end, you know what I don't like about you? I said, you are applauding me today, and you don't, or you won't elect us tomorrow when there are elections. And they were applauding once again. I mean, it was true. This is what truly happened. And of course, I understood why all this was the case. But then, of course, there was the merger of a West German party with our party, and the former chairman of the SPD, Oskar Lafontaine, and myself were, so to speak, the symbols of this merger. So people started to trust us, personally, so to speak. Still, they did not trust our party, but then they said the German Social Democratic Party is involved too, and this helped us build trust. Let me remind you of a newspaper of the Springer Publishing House, very reactionary paper. Now, they wrote Gregor Gysi is a Satan, but then they had to modify their attitude or their statement, and they said, well, actually, he is dangerous, but he pretends not to be dangerous. And eventually, they said, well, okay, this guy is quite nice, but the people who back him are awful and dangerous, so it was difficult for us. And had you asked me in 1990 whether we'd ever be able to gain ground, I'd have said no. 11.9%, that's millions of people, but there is still a major difference you have to bear in mind. In West Germany, we gained 8.7% of the votes, and in the East, we gained 28.5% of the votes, i.e., about 1/3 of the votes, of all votes casted. Now, if you get 1/3 of the votes, you are a popular People's Party, as they say. If you get 8.4%, you are a party representing interests. And it's a bit difficult to merge a party that represents interests and a people's party. Now, we've talked about the difficulties. Nevertheless, 8.7% sounds simple, but in the anti-communist Federal Republic of Germany, never ever after 1949, a party left of the SPD had a chance to get more than 5%. Usually they got less. There is the 5% hurdle, and no left-wing party had ever managed to negotiate the hurdle. I mean, I do understand how people and why people opt for sects and others, but I want to underline that it was a major success for us when we were capable of convincing 8.7% of the voters to vote for us, and it made the other parties nervous.
The next question is, what about the federal parliament? I mean, is it necessary that we are there? But I certainly think so that the public has to become aware of us, and if we are not represented in the parliament, then obviously we are not aware that we exist. And the second thing is that we do not take part in the consensus that exists between all the other parties. All the other parties say, well, it was correct, for example, to have the war in Afghanistan. We were the first who said right from the beginning, no, that is not correct. Other parties say, well, all right, people get older and older, so they should retire later. We say, no, that isn't so. Others say, okay, wages need to go down so that we can stay competitive. Besides, we need more and more precarious employment. I don't even want to get into detail about that, but the only people who said that isn't right was us. all said yes to the euro, and we said no, not the euro in that way, not because we were in principle against the euro, but at the time the conditions were not right for the euro. So what happens now in the parliament? The other parties are now upset that we are not sharing their consensus, and therefore they alienate us. They leave us apart, and they always say, you know, Gregor, it would be great if you once in a while agreed with us. Maybe we would treat you differently. And I then respond, no, apparently this is how we will continue, and this is, you know, how you can then continue treating us. If we start agreeing with the others and participating in the consensus with the others, we don't need a left party anymore. Then we might as well shut our store. So I think in that respect, we have somewhat of a unique position. And one other thing, important to change the so-called zeitgeist as we Germany. In other words, the mood in a country. And I think that is the most important thing for a left party. And how do you address the zeitgeist? How do you change? How do you influence it? I mean, it's influenced by the media, by science, by literature, by the movies. But the media, I would say, are the strongest influence for the mood of a country. I'll continue calling it zeitgeist. So our role as the left, how do you change the zeitgeist? Oh, okay, we'll do our own newspaper. We do, you know, a lot of complicated text with very small letters, and maybe a couple of people will read that. You know, those whose eyes are still good enough to read that small print. But whom do we reach with this? You know, how do we do that? How do we change the zeitgeist of people? And still, I'm telling you, we have some influence. In the neoliberal age, the question of social justice in the media did not play a role anymore. It was old-fashioned thinking from the 19th century. It had nothing to do anymore with modern thinking. Nowadays, it's fast, earnings, profits, shareholder value, all of this is important. Okay, a couple of people stay on the wayside, but who cares? And then you have a brave woman in the trade union who went to the talk shows and talked about social justice, and all the others said, well, what the hell, where are you from the 19th century? I mean, you don't understand. You don't understand the new era, the new way of thinking. And let me confess here, I was in the parliament and said, if I now use those words, social justice, everyone will take a deep sigh and will say, oh, Gysi, he's the only last you know, person who hasn't gotten it. Yes, I mean, he's the only last dumb person who missed the boat. And after all, who wants to be that? You know, so I myself was hesitating before I uttered those two words, and I knew it was risky for my own reputation, so to speak, but I still uttered those two words because nowadays the question of social justice is in all the media. And this is how the neoliberal zeitgeist was overcome. It was forced by the people whose fate was decreasing and less good, and they realize they will have no influence if they are not organized. Let me just take one example, the war in Afghanistan. I mean, we always represented the majority opinion of all Germans, even when that was already resolved, and when the war was decided. So if you represent the zeitgeist, again to use this word, you can be successful. In Europe, we are, for example, talking about an all-encompassing minimum wage, a minimum wage that will be paid for one working hour in the whole country by law, so that companies who do not comply with that will be punished. And when we, for the first time, came up with such a proposal for a minimum wage, who was against it? The liberals, the conservatives, the social democrats, the Greens, almost all the trade unions. I mean, practically everybody. Only 2 trade unions were in favor of that. In the meantime, all the trade unions are asking for that kind of wage. The Social Democrats are in favor of it. The Greens and the Conservatives, the Christians, Conservatives are Christian Democrats are hesitating, are sort of wavering. And yeah, I mean, people don't like to hear that, and you don't get a lot of votes with this kind of attitude. But I want to just tell you what changes you can bring about if you are in the avant-garde of the zeitgeist. I could give you other examples, but I don't want to belabor the point. The lefts were always big in their fight against each other. I mean, they always said, are you the ideologically most pure? Who is making the wrong compromises? But our task is to conquer society, not conquer each other. And for that, we have to approach people, and we have to change the zeitgeist, the thinking, the mood. So now I have to come to the point to say that the left is weak in Europe. I mean, actually, that's not quite true. We are in a way, one of the strongest parties in Europe, which I find a bit scary as well, because after all, our past history isn't exactly the most trustworthy, and that's why it's so difficult to find a consensus. I mean, for example, I was in Greece, I was got together with Syriza, the party that is allied with us. But the communists, they didn't have time to meet me, which I, by the way, think is quite something. But and the reason why they didn't want to meet with me is something bothered them about me. But it seems to me, why not tell me? Why not tell me what bothers you about me? I mean, it's ridiculous. How can I defend myself or explain my position if you don't even talk to me? I just don't get that. So the left was never in as much need as nowadays. Europe is in the process to become undemocratic and unsocial. And we are worldwide, for example, facing a climate catastrophe. We are facing increasing poverty in Latin America, in Africa, in some parts of Asia. Conditions are unbearable. It seems to me the left is totally indispensable, and still it is weak, and even in the United States it's not strong enough. And that is why we have to do something. We have to change internally, and to be able to gain people's trust, we have to bring credible alternatives. And albeit realizing we have no real example, on the other hand, okay, we don't have a ready-made model, but if we say society has to change in such and such a way, and in such and such direction, it can still develop. It's still room for development. We are not the only possessors of this ideology or of this new way. We want to create equal opportunities for people. And why is it so difficult to ask that all children have the same right to good education, and that not some are privileged because they have rich parents and the others do not? I mean, what the hell? Why can't we demand that? And you can, after all, win people over to this thinking. So I want us to become more active in this respect. And last but not least, something about the United States. The left in Europe had a clear picture of of the left in the United States. I mean, McCarthy, racism, and to top it off, the Vietnam War. So, okay, fine, you know, all three arguments are good arguments against the United States. But the United States is a little bit more than that. I mean, the United States always had leftist trade unionists and people on the left. I mean, it seems to me the picture was a little bit one-sided, and I think that is another job of the Rosa Luxemburg Foundation to work on. I mean, not only do we want to create that network where everybody can talk to each other and, you know, they can talk at the United Nations because everyone is there to begin with, so you don't have to travel around 192 states. But I think the other work we have ahead of us is to talk to scientists, to churches, to workers, to trade unions, in order to get a more differentiated image of the United States, so that Germans don't think, the United States, that's that. It's not just that. There's more than just one side.
Und ich sage Ihnen, ich weiß nicht, ob Sie das so registriert haben, deshalb möchte ich Ihnen das erzählen. George W. Bush.
I mean, okay, George W. Bush was a catastrophe, and I must say I applaud the American people that 4 years ago they said, okay, we'll vote even a black person to be the president of the United States after George W. Bush. I mean, I've never seen something like that in my life. Obama came to the victory column in Berlin, and there were 200,000 people coming and listening to this candidate. At the time, he wasn't even the president. He was a candidate for presidency. And they gave him this fantastic welcome. And the reason was that the entire European youth, the young people, they were tired of the old U.S. policy. They wanted a different United States. And okay, people were disappointed, maybe, of course, the next 4 years. On the other hand, to his defense, he didn't really know what awaited him, what kind of opposition awaited him in the form of the Republicans. On the other hand, you know, fast forward to last week, I mean, the choice between Romney and Obama, I believe, is pretty clear to us. I mean, and it's not so much Romney as a person, but the attitudes he took. But now it is up to Obama to keep the promises that he gave prior to his first election. And I think this is where the left plays, again, a decisive role. We have to exert pressure on this. I have one wish: recognize the state of Palestine, have peace in the Middle East. I mean, I know, of course, you have to include the Israel, but we need both. We need the two-state solution, and I think there Obama and the United States plays a large role. So the left party will exist as long as there are left people who think that way. And as long as we exist, we can exert influence. And as long as we exert influence, we can change the zeitgeist. We must work theoretically. We must have ideas how to transform a society. Capitalism, I know, I mean, I know what it can do. I know what enormous scientific achievements were done in the United States, innovative ideas. But capitalism is also very unfair and very unjust. And maybe can we agree on have a market, free market economy? Okay, I don't want just one bakery who is a monopoly and decides all the prices. Okay, no, market economy, free market economy is fine, but the welfare, the public welfare, social security must be in public hands, in the public domain. I don't want the private industry to decide on the prices of electricity, and that these people can live there and these people can live there and these children go to that school and these to this guy. That isn't what I have in mind. In Europe, the understanding for the fact that more than half people in the United States are not for obligatory health insurance is inconceivable to Europeans. And we have a different idea of these things. Okay, I mean, so the health reform is definitely one of the biggest achievements of Obama, and had Romney been elected, he would have rolled it back. But in 4 years, when a Republican might come to power again, it will be too late. Health reform is here to stay. So my point is to get a different idea of the United States in Europe. I mean, I did walk through Manhattan today a little bit, and it is a very, very unusual city, a very unique city. If you come from Berlin, it is different. If somebody had told me in 1985 that I would open a Rosa Luxemburg Foundation in New York and express some leftist paroles, I would, in all of this in 2012, I would have told him that he should maybe see a psychiatrist, because obviously, you know, he should have his head examined. So there is one advantage that we East Germans have. We have an advantage in our experience. We know what it means that a system just disappears. I mean, a few weeks ago you thought, oh, well, the system is here for eternity, and a couple of weeks later it's gone. So obviously you have to you know, cope with that. And in a way, I wish this experience on each of us.